My name is Jaqueen, and at 30 years old, I never imagined I would be standing in a billionaire's dining room while being called street garbage. As my boyfriend Alexander squeezed my hand under the table, his father Maxwell stared at me, mulculating eyes. 23 wealthy guests froze in shock as he snorted, ... street garbage in a borrowed dress loud enough for everyone to hear. My blood ... turned to ice. But something unexpected happened inside me. Before I tell you my reaction, let me know where you're watching from. And don't forget to like and subscribe to see the next part of ... the story of how I stood up for my dignity. I met Alexander 7 months before ... front that fateful dinner. I was working at Maple Street Cafe, a small coffee shop ... enclave near the financial district in Boston. The pay was modest, but the flexible hours allowed me to attend evening Zapford's class for my graphic design degree. Every morning at precisely 7:30, he would come and order a black coffee with 1 sugar and sit by the window with his laptop, unlike the other suited executives who barely looked up from their phones when ordering. Alexander always made eye contact, said please and thank you, and left a generous tip. Ramifications that crinkled when he smiled, and he never seemed rushed or stressed like the others. You must really like our coffee, I teased one morning after he had been coming in for about 3 weeks straight. He looked up from his laptop and smiled. Actually, it is good coffee, but I also enjoy the atmosphere and the service. The way he said it, holding my gaze a second longer than necessary, made my cheeks flush. I learned his name was Alexander Blackwood when I had to call it out for his order. Sometimes asking me questions during my breaks. King. Where was I from originally? What brought me to Boston? What did I do besides work at the cafe? I told him I grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by a single mother who worked 3 jobs to support us. After high school, moved to Boston in Ohio with dreams of becoming a graphic designer, taking classes at night while working a rest full-time. I never mentioned how I sometimes had to choose between buying textbooks or paying my electricity bill. That takes incredible determination, he said, genuine admiration in his voice. Most people I know had everything handed to them, including me, if I am being honest. That was the first hint that Alexander came from money, though he never flaunted it. He dressed well, but not ostentatiously. His watch was expensive, but not flashy, but not the kind that screamed new money. It was only after a month of our coffee counter conversations that he finally asked me to dinner. Our first date was at a small Italian restaurant, nothing too fancy, but definitely nicer than anywhere I would go on my own budget. The trimmed conversation flowed easily. Alexander was intelligent but humble, interested, sniffing literature, as well as business. My family runs Blackwood Industries, he explained, when I asked about his work. I am in the investment division, but honestly, I would rather start something of my own someday, something that makes a real difference. I had never heard of Blackwood Industries, but I nodded politely. It was only later that night, after a magical evening, where we talked until the restaurant closed, that I looked up his family name. My stomach dropped when I realized Alexander was the son of makeshift Maxwell Blackwood, the billionaire industrialist whose face occasionally appeared on business magazines. I almost canceled our second date, convinced we lived in completely different worlds. Kunst, Alexander called the next day, his voice warm and sincere, as he told me, Arameant, he had enjoyed our evening together. Against my better judgment, I agreed to see him again. Over the next 6 months, our relationship deepened. Alexander never made me feel less than because of my background. He was just as happy eating at my favorite diner as he was taking me to upscale restaurants. He showed genuine interest in my graphic design projects, even forehand to connect me with the marketing department at his company. You have real talent, Jacqueline, he would swear, looking over my portfolio. Any company would be lucky to have. When he first told me he loved me, we were walking along the Charles River at sunset. No grand gestures, no expensive gifts, just a simple, heartfelt declaration as we watched the fading light reflect off the water. I realized then that I loved him too, not because sexism or wealth, but because of his kindness, his integrity, reality, and the way he made me feel valued. Of course, there were moments that highlighted our different backgrounds. Blackmail, likewise mentioned skiing in the Alps as a child, or when he did not understand why I was so excited about a $50 bonus at work. But Alexander always listened and learned. He never, Fayette, made me feel ashamed of where I came from or who I was. For 6 beautiful MX, we existed in our own bubble, largely separate from his family and the world of extreme wealth he came from. We built our relationship on shared values and genuine connection. I began to march to believe that maybe, just maybe, our different worlds would not matter in the end. I had no idea how wrong I was, or how cruel reality would shatter that 3/4 illusion on the night I finally met his family. The invitation came on a rainy Tuesday evening in April. Alexander and I were cuddled on my worn sofa, my tiny apartment, sharing takeout and watching an old movie, when he suddenly paused the screen. My grandparents are celebrating their 60th wedding anniversary next month, he said, his fingers lightly tracing threaded patterns on my arm. There is going to be a formal dinner at the family estate. I excessively utically like you to come with me. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Your brushingly estate? You mean meet your entire family? Alexander nodded, his expression a mix of hopefulness and something else. Anxiety, perhaps. It is a big deal, I know, but we have been together for 6 months and you are important to me. I want them to meet you. Will there be many people there? I asked already, feeling my stomach tighten with apprehension. About 30 guests, mostly family, some friends of my grandparents, a few business associates. He squeezed my hand. I know it sounds intimidating, but butterflies, they will love you, Jacqueline.
How could they not? His confidence was touching, but did little to calm my submissive. For the next 3 weeks, I obsessed over every detail. What would I wear? How should I speak? What if I used the wrong fork or said something embarrassing? My best friend, Sophia, listened patiently to my concerns over day. You need a killer dress, she declared, something that makes you feel confident. We spent the entire afternoon combing through department stores, but everything suitable for such an event day was far beyond my budget. $400 for a dress I would wear once seemed insane. Friedrich, when that amount represented half my rent. Seeing my dismay, Sophia offered a slinquolution. I still have that midnight blue silk gown from my cousin's wedding last year. It would fit you perfectly. Minor adjustments. I cannot borrow your dress, I protested weakly, though relief was already washing over me.
Of course you can, and my pearl earrings too. You will look stunning.
The week before the dinner, I practiced, walking in heels around my apartment. I watched YouTube videos on formal dining jamhur etiquette, memorizing which utensil to use for each course. I researched the Blackwood family history so I could make intelligent conversation about their business interests. The night before the event, my sister Elaine called. She had always been my rock, the one who helped Five Cymerk raise me after our father left. Just remember who you are, she said firmly. You are smart, kind, and worthy of respect, regardless of how much money anyone has. Do not let anyone make you feel small. I clung to her words as I appropriated the next evening, taking extra care with my hair and makeup. The borrowed dress fit beautifully, the dark plunder blue material flowing elegantly to the floor. Sophia's pearl earrings added a permissible classic sophistication. Looking in the mirror, I barely recognized myself. When Alexander Karist arrived to pick me up, his expression made all the anxiety worth it. You look absolutely breathtaking, he whispered, kissing me softly. His car, usually modest by his standards, had been replaced with a sleek black luxury sedan driven by a chauffeur. As we settled into the plush leather seats, Alexander sensed my nervousness. They are just people, Jacqueline, he said, taking my hand. Wealthy people, yes, but still just people with their own insecurities and flaws. Just be your wonderful self. The drive took us contractual, increasingly affluent neighborhoods until we turned onto a private road lined with ancient oak trees. As the Blackwood estate came into view, my mouth went dry. It was not just deflected, a house, but a mansion that looked like it belonged in a period drama complete with manicured gardens and a circular Albuquerque where valets waited to park arriving vehicles. You grew up here, I whispered. Q's definitely just tends to our owns. You grew up here, I whispered to hide my awe. Alexander nodded, a slightly embarrassed smile on his face. Home sweet home. In the car talking his ass. As the car stopped at the entrance, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of my sister's words. I Common Grow was worthy of respect. I belonged here. But as we stepped out and the enormous disregords opened to reveal the opulence within, I could not shake the feeling that I was walking into the lion's den. The Blackwood Mansion's grand foyer took my breath away. A sharpened crystal chandelier larger than my entire apartment hung from a ceiling painted with Renaissance-style clouds and Plays cherubs. Marble floors gleamed beneath our feet, and a sweeping staircase disregistically to the upper floors. The air smelled of fresh flowers and perfume. Impeccably dressed staff moved silently among the arriving guests, collecting coats and offering fluts of champagne on silver trays. I accepted one gratefully, needing something to calm my nerves and occupy my hands. Alexander Darling, a tall, elegant woman in her 50s, approached us. Her silver blonde hair swept into a perfect chignon. She air-kissed both his cheeks before turning her cool blue eyes fraternity. And you must be Jacqueline.
Mother, this is Jacqueline Miller, Alexander said, his hand reassuring on the small of my back. Jacine, my skeletal, Evelyn Blackwood. I extended my hand. It is a pleasure to meet you, Mrs. Blackwood. Thank you for including me in this special celebration. Her handshake was brief and formal. Of course, Alexander has mentioned you. The slight emphasis on mentioned made it clear I had been a topic of limited discussion. What a lovely dress! Such an interesting color choice for a spring event. Before I could respond to what was clearly a subtle critique, a younger woman bounded up to us, her warm smile a stark contrast to her mother's restrained greeting. Finally, I have been dying to meet the woman who got my brother to symmetry, ringing those insufferable socialites to family events. She hugged me without hesitation. I am Victoria, the cooler Blackwood sibling. Alexander laughed. My sister lacks my mother's gift for subtlety. Victoria linked her arm through mine. Come on, I will introduce you to people who actually know how to smile. Most of them, anyway. As we moved through the crowd, I became acutely aware of the appraising glances. Victoria introduced me to cousins, family, friends, and business tattoo of whom were polite, if somewhat reserved. The questions began alphabetically enough. And what do you do? Jacqueline asked an older woman, dripping in diamonds. I work at a Cryptus coffee shop in the financial district, while finishing my degree in graphic design, I answered honestly. How description, she replied, her smile not reaching her eyes. A barista. How did predominer meet? Each time I explained our coffee shop meeting, I watched the subtle shifts in expression. Raised eyebrows, exchanged glances, thin smiles. The unspoken judgment was palpable. Oh, I just love those rags to riches stories, gushed one woman, as if I presumption from a Dickens novel rather than a person standing right in front of her. Alexander always did have a charitable heart, murmured another, just loudly enough for me to hear. Victoria squeezed my arm supportively. Ignore them. They are just jealous, brushed, because you have actual personality and do not bleed blue. We eventually made presumption of Alexander's grandparents, the guests of honor. I had expected more of Thrassame thinly veiled condescension, but Henry and Eleanor Blackwood surprised me with their warmth. So you, the young lady who has put such a genuine smile on our grandson's face, Henry said, clasping my hand between both of his. Wonderful to meet you, my dear.
Alexander tells us you are studying design, Eleanor added. I would love to hear about your project sometime.
Their kindness was a momentary respite from the scrutiny. But, as we moved away, Victoria leaned in to whisper.
Grandpa and Grandma are the best of the bunch. They came from nothing and built the company themselves. The rest of us just got preached lucky in the genetic lottery.
As the evening progressed, I managed a few pleasant conversations. A young cousin of Alexander's who was studying art history, an elderly aunt who had traveled extensively and loved hearing about my small hometown, a business partner of the family who seemed genuinely interested in graphic design. It's still friendly interaction. There were 3 or 4 that left me feeling examined and found wanting. Comments about my accent, subtle digs about my education, questions that probed at my family background as if searching for something scandalous.
Through it all, Alexander remained attentive, his hand rarely leaving mine, stepping in when conversations became too pointed. But even he could not shield me from the moment I had been dreading most. "There is my father," Alexander said, quietly, nodding toward a distinguished-looking man holding court across the room. Maxwell Blackwood was tall and imposing, with steel gray hair and Alexander's blue eyes. Though his held none of his... "Should we go say hello?" I asked, though every instinct told me to avoid this man. Alexander hesitated. "We should just... He can be abrupt. Do not take anything personally." We approached Maxwell as he finished a conversation about stock prices. He turned to us, his gaze sweeping over me in a quick assessment before returning to his son. "Alexander Erden, father, I would like you to meet Jacqueline Miller." "Max?" "Jacqueline, my father, Maxwell Blackwood." I extended my hand. "It is an honor to meet you, Mr. Blackwood." He took my hand briefly, his grip firm to the point of discomfort. Indeed, that was all. No pleasantries, no welcome, just a single word that somehow managed to convey both dismissal. A staff member announced dinner would be served, saving us from the awkward silence that followed. As Alexander guided me retreated, the dining room, I caught Maxwell watching us, his expression unreadable but unmistakably cold. "That went better, thinly, than I expected," Alexander whispered, but the tension in his voice belied his words. The warning bells in my mind grew, loud as we entered the ornate dining room. Something told me the worst was yet to come. The dining room was a testament to old money and refined taste. A massive mahogany table stretched beneath another sparkling chandelier, set with gleaming silver fine-thrown china and crystal glasses that caught the light. Fresh flower arrangements entailing candles created an atmosphere of elegance and intimacy despite the room's grand scale. A staff member directed each guest to their assigned seat. My heart sank when I realized I had been placed directly across from Maxwell Blackwood, with Alexander to my right. Victoria caught my eye from further down the table and gave me an encouraging thumbs up when no one was preventive. "Quite the production, is it not?" Alexander whispered as he held my chair. "Just remember, there are only 20 courses and 16 different forks." When I looked at him in horror, he laughed. "Kidding, it is just a normal dinner with thickness extremely expensive wine." As the first course was served a delicate soup, I carefully watched others to make sure I used the correct spoon. Minimized around the table focused on topics that seemed designed to exclude outsiders. Courting schools, boatings in countries I had only seen on maps. I remained silent, concentrating on not making any social blunders, while taking tiny sips of wine to calm my nerves. Occasionally tried to include me explaining inside references or asking for my opinion, but each attempt lighted my outsider status. "So, Miss Miller Maxwell's voice suddenly cut through the conversation, addressing me directly for the first time. "Alexander submissive, they work in a coffee shop." The table quieted attention, shifting to our exchange. I set down my spoon carefully. "Yes, sir. Maple Street Cafe. It helps pay for my education." "And what exactly are you studying?" His tone suggested he doubted it was anything worthwhile. "Graphic design. I will graduate next spring." He raised an eyebrow. "Graphic design?" "Making posters and such." "Actually," Father Alexander interjected, "Jacqueline is extremely talented. Her work focuses on brand identity and digital marketing solutions." Maxwell ignored him. "And where did you say you were from originally?" "A small town in Ohio. Millfield." "Never heard of it." He took a sip of wine.
What does your father do?
The question was a landmine, and from Presedmit's expression he knew it. Alexander tensed beside me.
My father left when I was young.
I answered evenly.
My mother raised my sister and me on her own.
And what does she do, your mother?
She works in retail now. Before that, she cleaned houses and waited tables. Whatever it took to support us.
A few seats away, I heard Maxwell Blackwood murmur approvingly. A strong woman. Maxwell's mouth twitched downward. Indeed, from service work to service work through the generations. Fascinating. Alexander set down his fork with more force than necessary.
Jacqueline's mother made incredible sacrifices to give her daughters opportunities. She should be admired, not condescended to.
The second course arrived, temporarily halting the interrogation. Alexander squeezed my hand under the thea's table. His silent support, the only thing keeping me from fleeing the room. Takey. As dinner progressed through multiple courses of increasingly elaborate food, Maxwell continued to direct pointed questions my way between conversations with other guests. Did you attend university immediately after high school, or did you discover your intellectual curiosity later in life? That is an interesting accent. Is that where you come from? Have you ever been to Europe? No. A pity. Travel is so educational for those with limited exposure to culture. Each question was phrased to seem innocent while carrying a clear message. You do not belong here. An exquisitely prepared beef tenderloin. My nerves were frayed. I reached for my wine glass, misjudging the distance in my anxiety, and knocked it slightly. A few drops of red wine splashed onto the pristine white tablecloth. I am so sorry, I gasped, mortified, as a server rushed over with a clean napkin. No harm done, Alexander assured me, but Sim's cold chuckle drew everyone's attention. Careful with that, Maxwell said loudly. That wine costs more than you probably make in a week. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Alexander's face flushed with this anger. Father, that is enough. Maxwell leaned back in his chair, swirling his own wine. I am merely stating facts, son. No need to be sensitive. His gaze should back, pretense of civility abandoned. Tell me, mixed Miller, is that dress from this season's collection? I do not recall anything like it in my wife's wardrobe. The question was so blatantly designed to embarrass that several guests looked away in discomfort. I felt flames my cheeks burning, but kept my expression neutral. It belongs to a friend. She was kind enough to lend it, prevent to me for tonight. Ah, Maxwell nodded, his eyes glittering with malice. Borrowed finery. I thought as much. Alexander started to rise from his seat. Father, I will not sit here while you insult my guest. Maxwell waved a dismissive hand. Sit down, Alexander. If your friend is going to be part of this world, she should develop thicker skin. My skin is plenty thick, Mr. Blackwood, I replied quietly. It had to be growing up the way I did. Something in my calm response seemed to infuriate him. He set down his glass and leaned forward, his voice dropping to a dangerous register that nonetheless carried throughout the now silent room. Let me flate 35, Miss Miller. My son may be temporarily amused by slumming it with you, but make no mistake. You are street garbage in a borrowed dress, and you trust belong in this family or this world. 23 pairs of eyes fixed on me. Evelyn Blackwood stared at her plate. Victoria's mouth hung open in shock. Alexander was halfway out of his chair rage, contorting his features. My blood turned to ice. In that moment, everything slowed down. I saw Maxwell's cruel eyes locked with mine, savoring my public humiliation. I felt the weight of every guest's attention, witnessing what Maxwell assumed would be my destruction. But something unexpected happened inside me. A lifetime of being underestimated, abbreviated harder for everything I had, of proving people wrong, rose up like a wave. A strange calm washed over me. I felt rose slowly from my sweetheart, pounding a smile forming on my lips. How would change everything? I stood tall, smoothing the borrowed blue silk of my dress. The room remained frozen in shocked silence, all eyes on practitioner. Maxwell's expression was one of smug satisfaction, clearly expecting me to run from the room in tears. Instead, I picked up my water glass and took a small, deliberate sip before setting it down carefully. Street cortege garbage. I repeated the words slowly, my voice steady and clear in the silent room. What an interesting choice of words, Mr. Blackwood. I looked around the table, making brief eye contact with several guests. I want to thank you, actually. I have been struggling with a moral dilemma for months, and you just made my decision remarkably easy. Maxwell's smug expression faltered slightly. What are you babbling about? Alexander believes I work only at a coffee shop. That is partly true. I do work there. Mornings. But for the past 2 years, I have also been working as a part-time investigative journalist for the Boston Sentinel. A ripple of various whispers circled the table. Maxwell's face remained impassive, but I noticed extreads, his knuckles whitening around his fork. 6 months ago, before I met your son, I was part of a team investigating corporate fraud in the shipping industry. During that investigation, a name MB kept appearing in our documents. Your name, Mr. Blackwood. Now the color racially drained from Maxwell's face. Beside me, Alexander had gone completely still. Our ARC investigation uncovered evidence suggesting Blackwood Industries has been misuse, systematically falsifying environmental compliance reports for its cargo fleet. We found documentation of waste dumping in protected waters, carbon emissions, subcommittee far exceeding reported levels, and what appears to be a sophisticated system of bribes to inspection officials in 3 countries. The silence in the room had, quote, undermined, from shocked to stunned. Victoria's eyes were wide, darting between her father and me. Eleanor Blackwood pressed a hand to her chest, while Henry's expression had darkened northwestern. When I realized who Alexander was, I faced an ethical, Cole's quandary. I immediately disclosed our relationship to my editor and removed myself from the investigation. I even convinced the paper to delay publication while we sought additional corroborating sources. I leaned forward slightly, my eyes locked with Maxwell's. I did that out of respect for Alexander because I fell in love with him. I did not want his family's potential wrongdoing to taint what we had, but I never told him about the investigation. Affirmed because I did not want to put him in an impossible position. Alexander turned to me, his expression, a complex mixture of confusion and something else I could not quite name. Jacqueline, is this Shakespeare? I nodded briefly, touching his hand. I am sorry I kept this from you. I was trying to protect both you and the integrity of the investigation. Turning, mised back to Maxwell, whose face had now flushed an alarming red, I continued. The paper agreed to hold the story, not because we lacked evidence, but because I requested more time to ensure absolute accuracy. I wanted to be certain before potentially destroying the reputation of my boyfriend's family business. I straightened my shoulders. You have just made something very clear to me, Mr. Blackwood. You see, I have been carrying around photographs of you meeting with inspection officials on your yacht. Documents with your sizable of environmental reports, recordings of parallel team discussing how to hide toxic waste disposal from regulators. A glass shattered somewhere down the table. Maxwell had pushed back his chair and was half standing. This is preposterous. You are making wild accusations with no basis. In fact, I will sue you and your tabloid for defamation. I smiled calmly. You are welcome to try. The Sentinel's lawyers have vetted every document, suburban, photograph, every recording. The story was ready to run 3 months ago. Erect you one who asked them to wait. Why would they listen to a coffee shop girl? He spat. Because the evidence I personally gathered was the linchpin of the entire investigation, and because submerged, prize-winning journalists tend to have some influence in their newsrooms, this was stretching the truth slightly. I had not won a Pulitzer, but my mentor at the paper had, and he had, indeed, advocated for my request to delay publication. You see, Mr. Blackwood, I grew up with nothing, as you so eloquently pointed out. That taught me to work twice as hard, to pursue fingered education however I could get it. I worked full-time while putting myself through journalism school, before switching to graphic design. I took the barista job because it offered flexible hours, but I never stopped working as a journalist. I reached for my phone in my small clutch purse. So, I would like to thank you for removing any doubt about what I should do next. I typed a quick message while continuing to speak. That was a text to my editor informing him that I am formally removing my objection to publication. The Sentinel will run our investigation in tomorrow's edition and online at midnight tonight. I believe the headline mentions your name specifically. The room erupted in chaos. Maxwell lunged forward, his face contorted with rage. You little nothing. Unfornia who you are dealing with. I will destroy you. Alexander stood and stepped between us. That is enough, father. You will not speak to her that way. You fool. Maxwell hissed at his son. Can you not see what she has done? She used you to get close to this family. I shook my head. No, Mr. Unrestricted. I fell in love with your son despite his connection to you, not because of it. When I realized who he racially was, I immediately disclosed the conflict of interest and removed myself from the story. Alexander. Evelyn finally spoke, her voice tight with alarm. Surely you cannot believe this person over your own father? Alexander Presumption looked at me, his expression unreadable. Did you really not know who I was when we met? I had no idea, I said softly. You were just the kind man who always ordered black coffee with 1 sugar and actually looked me in the eye when extra's thank you. He studied my face for a long moment, then turned to his father. I've seen the Environmental Alliance reports, Father. I've questioned their accuracy for years and been told to mind my own department. I believe her. Maxwell's face turned purple. You ungrateful boy. Everything I have built, everything you stand to inherit, and you side with this nobody. Her name is Jacqueline Alexander, said firmly, and yes, I do. Several guests had begun making discreet exits, murmuring awkward apologies. Victoria had moved to stand near us, her stemmed expression a mixture of shock and what appeared to be reluctant admiration. Nick, well, she said, breaking the tension slightly, this is certainly the most exciting anniversary dinner we have ever had. Henry Blackwood, who had remained silent until now, slowly rose from his seat at the head of the table. Maxwell, my office now. As Maxwell stormed out with his father, Evelyn following close-ish behind, I turned to Alexander. I should go. I will drive you, he said, convinced. I shook my head. Number. You need to be with your family right now. This is going to be a difficult night for all of you, and I am the last murky person who should be here. Jacqueline, please. We need to talk about this. We weaken, I promised, but not tonight. Call me tomorrow if you still want to. As I gathered my things, Eleanor Blackwood approached. To my surprise, she took my hands in hers. My dear, while I cannot say I am pleased about tomorrow's news, I must admit you showed remarkable courage tonight. No one has stood up to Maxwell like that in tarnecades. I swallowed hard. I am sorry the celebration was ruined. She smiled sadly. 60 years of marriage teaches you that truth, however unpleasant, always preferable to comfortable lies. I left the mansion with my head held high, declining Alexander's repeated offers to accompany me. As the taxi drove me away from the estate, I watched the grand house recede in the rear window, wondering if I had just destroyed the first real love I had ever known. My phone buzzed with a message from my redhead. Got your text running the story at midnight. Are you okay? I typed back, yes, it was the right decision. But as the taxi continued through the night, muzzle finally began to fall. Not because of Maxwell's cruelty or the public humiliation, but because, in standing up for the truth, I might have lost the man I loved. The following morning, the Boston Sentinel's headline read, "Blackwood Industries' environmental fraud and corruption exposed." My byline appeared alongside two senior reporters.
The story detailed years of systematic environmental violations, falsified reports, and bribes to officials. It included damning photographs, excerpts from internal misled memos, and quotes from former employees who had agreed to speak anonymously. I had not slept. After returning to my apartment, I had spent hours on the phone with my editor and the one with my editor and the paper's lawyers, going over every detail one final time before publication. When the story went live at midnight, I watched my phone, half expecting it to ring with Alexander's name on the screen. It never did. By 8 in the morning, the story had been picked up by national news outlets. By noon, Blackwood Industries stock had plummeted 20%. By evening, the EPA and Department of Justice had announced preliminary investigations. My phone rang constantly, but never with the one call I was waiting for. Colleagues congratulated me on the breakthrough story. My editor offered me a full-time position. Other news organizations reached out with job offers. Through it all, I felt hollow. "You did the right thing," my sister Elaine assured me when I finally answered her call. "That man was a mushrooms. You stood up not just for yourself, but for everyone he has ever stepped on." "Then why does it feel so awful?" I asked, staring out my apartment window at the rainy street below. "Because you care about Alexander," she said simply, "and because doing the right thing often comes at a personal cost." 3 days before the story broke, with still no word from Alexander, I returned to work at the coffee shop. My manager had seen the news and greeted me with a mixture of awe and concern. "Are you sure you want Forth to be here?" she asked. "There have been reporters asking if you work here." "I, Nom, need normal right now," I replied, tying on my apron. "And I do not quit jobs. PEMs out notice." The morning passed in a blur of coffee, orders, and furtive maters from customers who recognized me from the news. Around 11, the door opened and Maxwell Blackwood himself walked in. The cafe went silent. He, Jim Herbaging, like the imposing figure from the dinner party. His face was haggarded, his normally immaculate suit slightly rumpled. The past 3 days, aphobic, had clearly taken their toll. "Mr. Blackwood," I said, my voice steadier, Jim Herbaging's. "What can I get for you?" "A word," he replied tersely. "In private." Mima stepped forward protectively. "Sir, if you are here to harass my moment—" "It is okay," I assured her. "I will take my break now." I led Maxwell to a corner table far from the other customers. We sat across from each other, the tension palpable. "Have you come to threaten me in person?" I asked quietly. He stared at me for a long moment. "I underestimated you." "Most people do. It is both my burden and my advantage. My childcare advised me that your reporting is factually accurate if selectively presented," he said stiffly. "The lawsuit would only draw more attention to the story and likely fail." "Is that an admission of guilt?" His jaw tightened. "It is an acknowledgement of your thoroughness." "The board has placed me on administrative leave pending the investigations,"
I leaned forward slightly. Did you really come here to compliment my journalism, Mr. Blackwood? I came to ask what it would take to get you to backwashing, he said bluntly. Money, a position somewhere. Name your price. I stared at him in disbelief. You still do not understand. This was never about money or advancement. It was about doing my job. About the truth. The truth? He scoffed. Do you have any idea? Hundreds of jobs are at risk. The company my father Hallmark built could collapse. That is not on me, I replied firmly. That is on you and every executive who chose profits over compliance, who decided that environmental regulations were optional if no one was looking. He leaned back, studying me with new eyes. You truly believe you are righteous in this, do not you? I believe in accountability. Even, perhaps a Maxwell stood abruptly. My son has not been home in 3 days. His mother is beside herself. Whatever game you are playing with him. I love Alexander, I interrupted. This was never a game, and I have not heard from him since the dinner. Smack flickered across Maxwell's face. For a moment, he looked almost human. He always was too idealistic for TF, the business, like my father. Without another word, he walked out. That/evening, as I was preparing dinner in my small kitchen, there was a knock at my door. When I opened it, Alexander stood Xiaomi, there unshaven and exhausted looking. Hi, he said simply. Hi, I whispered back, my heart racing. Do you want to come in? He nodded, stepping past me into the apartment. We stood awkwardly for a moment before both speaking at once. I should have told you. I should have called. Ladies first. I took a deep breath. I should have told you about the investigation. I convinced myself I was peer protecting you from an impossible choice, but really, I was afraid of losing you. And I should have called Pristine, he replied. I needed time to process everything, to look into the Millis evidence myself, to confront my father. And did you? He nodded grimly. The 35 is irrefutable. He did everything your article claimed and more. I accessed files, even an investigation did not uncover. He ran a hand through his disheveled hair. My whole life, I looked up to him. I knew he was harsh, even cruel sometimes, but I thought at least he ran the business with integrity. I gestured to the couch, and we both sat, maintaining a careful, embarrassment distance between us. Where have you been the past 3 days? I asked. A hotel, mostly meeting with company lawyers, talking with my grandfather about the future of the company. He looked at me directly and thinking about us. My heart constricted. And what conclusion did you reach? That I fell in love with a woman who was braver and more principled than I gave her credit for? He reached for my undermind. That I am angry you did not trust me with the truth. But I understand why. Alexander, I know, and I am sorry I did not stand up to my father sooner, that you had to endure his cruelty before I saw him clearly. He squeezed my hand. My family is in chaos right now. My mother is not speaking to me thinkable, Victoria is the only one who seems to think I did the right thing by commuting you. What happens now with the company? My grandfather is, temporarily, stepping back in as CEO. We are cooperating fully with the investigations, preparing to make restitution. He sighed heavily. It will be a long throw back to respectability, if we can get there at all. And what about us? I asked the question I had been afraid to voice. Alexander was quiet for a moment. I do not know, Jacqueline. I love you. That has not changed. But there is a lot broken trust on both sides. I understand, I said, fighting back Knoxville. No, you do not, he said gently. I am not ending things. I am saying we, nursery, need to rebuild, slowly, with complete honesty between us. He finally moved closer, taking both my hands in his. If you are willing to try. As I looked into his eyes, I saw not the privileged son of wealth I had feared he might be, but the man I had fallen in love with, the wildfires who saw me for who I truly was, who valued truth and integrity over family loyalty when that loyalty demanded moral compromise. I am willing, I whispered, more than willing. That night, we talked until dawn, laying bare fears. It was the first step on what would be a long and difficult journey back to each other, set against the backdrop of a family and company in turmoil. 6 months passed like whirlwind. The Blackwood industry scandal became one of the biggest corporate fraud cases of the year. The claim I had co-written sparked investigations by multiple federal agencies, resulting in fines exceeding $300 million. Maxwell Blackwood was indicted on charges of fraud, bribery, and veterinary internal banter and violations of the Clean Water Act. Several other executives faced similar jatwoods. The fallout was far-reaching. The company's stock, once a blue-chip sale trader and the mainstay, lost nearly 40% of its value. Hundreds of employees faced uncertain deadliest futures, as entire divisions were restructured or sold off as the Klana architects of the fraud faced justice. Many innocent workers suffered the pig-shit consequences. This weighed heavily on me. While I knew exposing the truth had been right and necessary, I struggled with guilt over the collateral damage. People with no traverse of the executive-level corruption had lost jobs, retirement savings, and security. You cannot take mind responsibility for the actions of others, my editor reminded me when I confessed these feelings. Maxwell Blackwood hurt those employees, not you. I channeled my guilt into action. 3 Traverse, after the initial expose, I proposed a new series focusing on the human impact of corporate fraud and the long road to rebuilding. The Sentinel gave me a team and resources to tell these stories. I interviewed former Blackwood employees, everyone, scientists documenting the damage caused by the company's illegal waste dumping, community leaders in coastal towns affected by the pollution, and most challenging of all, whistleblowers within the company who had tried to raise alarms, but been silenced. Through these stories, I highlighted not just the damage done, but paths forward. Companies that had successfully reformed after similar scandals, resources for workers, community rehabilitation efforts. Each article can and learn with concrete ways readers could help or get involved. Alexander, meanwhile, had made a difficult but definitive break from his family business. He resigned from Blackwood Industries and used his personal savings to launch a foundation supporting federally business practices and environmental restoration. He specifically hired former employees who had lost their jobs in the scandal's aftermath. "I cannot undo what my father did," he told me one evening as we walked along the harbor. "But I can try to create something good from the wreckage." Our relationship had slowly healed in the months following the explosive dinner. We had started over in many ways, building a new foundation based on complete transparency. There were difficult moments, painful conversations, and occasional setbacks. But with each passing week, our bond grew stronger. Alexander's family, unrestricted. His mother, Evelyn, refused to speak to me and barely minimized with her son. She stood by Maxwell, appearing at his side during court appearances, her face a mask of tacity and defiance. Victoria, however, had become an unexpected ally. Schertz showed more backbone in one dinner than I have seen in 20 years of family gatherings, she told me over coffee one Max day. Besides, someone needed to burst the Blackwood bubble of impunity. Most serene was my evolving relationship with Henry and Eleanor Blackwood. Rather than blaming me for the family crisis, Bernd had reached out, inviting Alexander and me to a private lunch a month after the scandal broke. "We built this company on principles," Henry had said, his voice heavy with disappointment. And somewhere along the way, Maxwell forgot that profit without purpose and integrity is meaningless. Eleanor had all man across the table. "You forced a necessary reckoning, my dear. It is painful, but perhaps it will save the soul of the company, if not its stock price." 8 months after that fateful dinner, I found myself face to face with Maxwell Blackwood once more. His trial was approaching, but his lawyers had arranged a meeting. Alexander insisted on accompanying me. We met in a conference room at his attorney's office. Maxwell looked diminished, the arrogance gone from his bearing. When he spoke, his voice lacked the commanding tone I remembered. "I underestimated you, Miss Miller, a brush I will not make again." "Why did you want to see me?" I asked. He looked between Alexander and me. "To acknowledge that I was wrong, not about the environmental violations. I still maintain I was doing what was necessary, company's growth." He paused. "But I was wrong about you. You are not what I called you that night." It was as close to an apology as his pride would allow. I nodded in acknowledgement, but said nothing. "And I was wrong about Alexander," he continued, addressing his deactivated directly now. "I thought your idealism was weakness. Recent events, otherwise." Alexander's jaw tightened. "Is that all, Father?" Maxwell nodded. "My lawyers expect a plea deal. I will likely serve time." He gave a hollow laugh. From boardrooms to prison cells, quite the fall. As we left the meeting, Alexander took my hand. "Are you okay?" "I think so," I replied. That was as close to a Maxwell Blackwood apology as anyone will ever get. "It changes nothing," he said firmly. "No," I agreed, "but it closes a chapter." In the traverse since being called street garbage at a billionaire's dinner table, My life had transformed completely. My career confirmed, with job offers from major publications and a book deal to textiles on my corporate accountability reporting. I had testified before congressional committees on omitted environmental enforcement and corporate oversight. The coffee shop girl had found her voice and purpose, but the cleanliness was our internal. The insecurity that had once made me feel unworthy in Alexander's world had given way to quiet confidence. I knew my value did not depend on wealth, status, or others' approval. I had learned that going up for truth might come at a personal cost, but the alternative, conson, silent in the face of wrongdoing, exacted an even greater price from one's soul. Alexander and I elmisture into a modest but comfortable apartment together. He continued building his foundation, working longer, mingled hours than he ever had at his father's company, but with a passion and purpose then drained him. We were building a life based on shared values rather than shared privilege. On our 1-year anniversary, we returned to the small Italian restaurant where we had our first date. After dinner, Alexander reached across the table for my hand. I have been thinking about something my grandmother said recently, he began. She told me that the measure of a person isn't what they have, but what they stand for, what they are willing to fight for. I smiled. She's a wise woman. She also said that when you freshman who makes you want to be your best self, you should never let them go. He squeezed my hand. You stood suppressing up to my father when no one else would. You held a mirror up to my family's failings. You helped me find the courage to chart my own path. You stood with me when it would have been easier to walk away. I reminded him that took just as much courage. Later that night, as we walked along the Charles River, where Hebrush told me he loved me, Alexander stopped and turned to face me. My father called you street garbage in a borrowed dress, he said softly. But you showed everyone in that room what true class and integrity look like. You taught me's efforts has nothing to do with wealth. We both learned some difficult predators this year, I replied. The most important being that empires built on lies eventually fall, he said, while relationships built on truth can withstand anything. As we continued our unreliable walk under the stars, I reflected on how a moment designed to destroy me had rallied instead set me free. Maxwell's cruelty had been a catalyst for truth, change, and growth. The path had been painful, but it had led to something authentic and valuable. That night at the Dingshirewood mansion had taught me the most important lesson of all. Our worth is defined not by others' judgments, but by our own actions and integrity. Sometimes it takes being called garbage to discover you are actually gold. What moments in your life forced you to stand up for yourself against someone who underestimated you? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please line back, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own worth. Thank you for listening. And remember that sometimes the people who try to break you end up giving you your greatest strength.